welcome to another edition of TokStocks. I'm your host, Keir Reynolds, and today we're lucky enough to have Gwen Preston, Vice President, Communications with West Red Lake Gold Mines, trades with the ticker WRLG, TSXV Venture Exchange. How you doing today, Gwen?
I'm doing all right. Pardon my voice. A little under the weather after spending a week in Red Lake last week. I'm not blaming Red Lake. I'm just blaming the fact that weeks at the mine site are very busy. So I did come back with a bit of a cold.
I think it was PDAC. I think it was that.
It's possible that it's the pylon effect of PDAC, mine site, all of the things. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for catching up. We're sort of due. We haven't had a quarterly sort of update. We did a bunch of videos with you, because I saw you in Zurich in November. We had a nice time of it. Boy, you've had a lot going on. So number one, just in general, we've had sort of a robust gold market. The spot price of gold has been rocketing up. We've had all these conspiracy theories going on about if we're going to run out of gold and COMEX and all that sort of stuff. And in between all of that, you guys as a company have had a lot of different sort of things going on. So maybe before we sort of dive into a bunch of that, why don't you just explain a little bit about who you are and yourself and how long you've been with the company? You have a pretty unique background.
Yeah, for sure. I've been with West Red Lake for almost a year now. Time flies when you're having fun. And I joined the company. It was a great coincidence of timing in that Shane, who's the CEO here, understood that he needed to share the role of sort of communicating, being the face of the company, helping everybody out there understand what we're doing. He's a really experienced mine builder. And so we're building a mine, putting a mine into production. And so he needed to certainly make sure that he was able to focus enough time on driving that bus and not on the communication side. So he saw a need to do that. And I really love figuring out complicated stories in the mining space and communicating about them. And that's what I did for a bunch of years leading up to coming to West Red Lake. I wrote a newsletter that was called Resource Maven. I wrote about what stocks I was buying and selling in the junior mining space. And people subscribed to that newsletter because there's lots of really interested, engaged investors out there who love the junior mining space, but they're aware that it takes sort of knowledge and time, oh my goodness, time, and a network to really understand the opportunities and maximize that potential. And so I had those things to offer. So I wrote a newsletter and that was a great experience. I loved it. But I was ready for a change, and West Red Lake needed someone who was able to understand the really complicated technical machine that is developing and then mining a gold deposit. And I was happy to come and join this group because it's a fantastic group of mine builders.
Well, I've got a 24 stock portfolio for 2025, the TokStocks active portfolio. You're one of the 24. There's only 12 resource related companies. The rest are more fundamentally driven value plays. So I decided to, based upon, my understanding of the company and who you are and all the passion and energy you bring to the role, we've kept you in. However, it's been a little bit of an underperformer. Hasn't had as much leverage yet to the gold price, and it's these darn financings. It feels like you guys might be building a mine and putting it into production the rate that you're going through cash. So, could you speak to the crowd? There's obviously I'm sure your inbox has been flooded some days. You guys not so long ago announced yet another equity financing, caught a few people by surprise. But when the ducks are quacking, you got to feed them, friend or foe, you got to take the dough. And especially, when building a mine, you have to make sure that you're de-risking in case there's just any, startup sort of hiccups, especially kind of a restart where you're taking sort of a different strategy. What do you say to those folks that are kind of concerned about dilution and get a little frustrated?
Absolutely. I mean, I understand. I totally respect that frustration. It's real. I get it. It doesn't. I hope it helps to put this into a little bit of a bigger context. When you look at the amount of money that usually it takes to take a project from deposit through to production. I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. We have a chart on this, just pulled from Canadian listed companies that are currently putting gold mines into production. So they're somewhere between PFS to like construction decision, and how much money that company has put into that project. And then we also on the same chart show how many years that project is still before production, how many more years you're going to have to wait to see production. And so, yes, we have put $140 million into the Madsen mine in less than 2 years. So I get that the rate of burn and therefore the need to access that capital has felt pretty high. But if you look at that chart, our overall spend is actually really low because it just takes so much money to do this. Like you say, it's like you're actually building a mine. And not only that, I mean, we came at this opportunity that presented itself in sort of a reverse from usual order. Usually you define a deposit, you engineer, you permit, you make a construction decision, you get a debt facility, maybe you do a big financing, you find a major investor, you get a debt facility, maybe you find other financing capital that in another way, a royalty or whatever it might be. And then you have that large chunk of capital and you deploy that all into building the mine. We came at this from an entirely backwards way. So when you come at it from that normal way, you have the capital in hand. So as you're taking on the big projects that are needed to put this thing into production, you have the capital there. You've already arranged it. But the fact that we bought a mine that was built and permitted, but needed a bunch of work, and we couldn't delineate our mine plan until we had done some parts of that work, mostly a whole bunch of the drilling to make sure we understood the deposit so that we created a mine plan that we're confident we can deliver. It just means that we all did it backwards. We weren't in a situation where we could raise $140 million in a conventional mine construction facility close to when we bought the asset. That wouldn't have worked. And so instead we've had to access the capital as we go. And I understand that it's unusual and it has felt fast and therefore it's felt uncomfortable to shareholders. And I appreciate that. And then the fact that we haven't yet participated in this gold market, I think certainly also relates to what this asset is. We've spent all this money and we've talked about why we are going to make Madsen a success. Nonetheless, there's a major elephant in this room, which is this is still a mine that 2.5 years ago failed under the prior operator, right? And so this is absolutely a show me story. Other companies often, as they're going through that build, they get credit ahead of time, you might want to say. The market increases their value looking ahead to the fact that gold production is coming. But we're not getting that because people need to see that we succeed. So we're right on the edge of that with this bulk sample that we're literally on day 3 of putting the first stope of the bulk sample through the mill right now. And so we're right on the edge of demonstrating from all of the looks that we've had at how this is progressing. We believe we're right on the edge of demonstrating that all the things that we've done to unlock the value of Madsen are going to work. And so I certainly believe that as we pull out the show me, as we successfully put Madsen into production, then hopefully we'll even play catch up on this gold price because we haven't yet had exposure to it, but we're a very rare new gold mine starting production into this, hot gold market. So I get that the dilution is a challenge, and I totally get that the share price has not yet performed. We're right on the edge of, I think, addressing the biggest holdback on the share price, which is we have to do the show me. And on the dilution side, we certainly expect that we have the capital that we need. I say expect because mines are super complicated. If COVID hits or if some other thing happens, I don't want to make promises. But we spend a lot of time looking at our expected production schedule and our budget and making sure that we're aligning those things. So we expect that we have what we need. So hopefully the 2 issues that you raised there are things that are primarily in our past, and we're right on the edge of sort of outgrowing those things that have been significant for West Red Lake from inception until now.
So not too long ago, you were on the other side of the desk. You were the one doing the interview and having to do the DD and do the catch-ups with the companies. I'm sure sure there was, some moments where you're like, ah, darn, I don't really seem to be, seeing the advancement. How is it for you being on the other side with such a diverse amount of things to have to go on? So first of all, you've been highly successful in raising capital. Like you've needed a lot of capital to sort of move things forward. Less so than if you were doing this from if you were building it yourselves, from just exploration, and it was it's an underground mine, take $1 billion or so to sort of put something like that into production in Red Lake.
Yeah.
But how's it been being on the other side?
It's been a really, really interesting ride. I mean, first and foremost, I work with a really incredible group of people here. The team at West Red Lake are experienced, professional, focused, hardworking, caring, fun people, right? And so that is, and they're honest, and we're all working as hard as we can to make this mine a success for our shareholders, for Red Lake. And because, to be honest, there's a real underdog mentality in this office. We really, really want to show everyone that we can do this thing that we told everyone that we can do. We are incredibly driven to demonstrate that we bought this mine for a reason. And the reason was that the prior operator cut corners, and that led to things that made the grade too low and the costs too high. We came in, and mine building experience identified what those mistakes had been, and now we have done the work to address those. That's our process for unlocking, and we're really, really driven to show that we can do that. Now, so the people really matter. I work with an incredible group of people. Certainly managing this story in the market has its ups and downs. It's a very watched story, as you would expect. There's a history of this asset that was not fun for a lot of investors. And so absolutely, we get a lot of very close eyes on the story, understandably, deservedly so. And so we need to make sure that we deliver, that we make promises that we can deliver on, because that's essential. It's essential for any company, but I think it's maybe a little bit sharper a point when it comes to the Madsen mine, given the history that it has.
So I'm going to ask you again, and I know that I'm going to get a managed answer, but are you fully funded to get through to commercial production?
So we believe that we have the capital that we need to get through to commercial production. Like I said before, if an unexpected event arises, I can't manage the unexpected, right? We have done, our entire approach to the Madsen mine is based in true operational readiness. Like which is really about looking at every input, every requirement that is needed for a mine to run smoothly, and setting up a system and testing the system and making sure we staff the system and making sure that those people are the right people for that system. And so we're really working hard to reduce the likelihood of internal unexpected things. But no system is ever perfect, so who knows? But we expect, like I say, we have a production schedule. We're about to produce gold from our bulk sample over the coming weeks. We're potentially even today, but over the coming weeks, we will produce gold from our bulk sample. And then all through the second half of the year, we will consistently and increasingly feed mineralized material into our mill and produce gold. And it turns out that gold is selling for $3,000 US an ounce, which is $4,300 Canadian an ounce. So there's a currency thing there that's also helping us. So
excellent.
When we talk about us being motivated, well, we're really motivated to produce gold because, having 185 employees on site and, developing 20 to 25 meters of underground workings a day, plus mining and all of the, equipment and maintenance and procurement and everything, it's expensive to do what we're doing. We need to start producing gold. So we're really driven to get there.
So there was a video that played the other week, maybe not that many days ago, showing this beautiful mill starting to turn. I think it was your mill, and it was the video that shocked the world that it's not just a stock photo for that haven't been able to go in person. But that seemed like an exciting sort of milestone to turn that on. And was it just for show, or are you actually doing something with it?
Oh, it is definitely not for show. So I guess it was 2 weeks ago now. We're speaking on a Tuesday, so I think it was 2 weeks ago yesterday that we turned the mill back on. There had been several months of pre-commissioning work to make sure that it was ready to flip that switch. We turned it on. We started feeding legacy material. So like from the prior operator, just a stockpile of low grade, because you got to just start putting rock through it, pack it out, make sure that everything's working the way that it needs to. After about 5 days of that, we switched to a low grade stockpile of material that we have mined. As part of our development and like getting to the areas where we're doing the test mining, we had a stockpile of low grade material. And then on 2 days ago, on Sunday morning at 7:30 in the morning, we started feeding stope 1 of the bulk sample through the mill. And so it's going to take about 3 days for each of those stopes to go through the mill. And
how many tons will you be running through approximately?
So it'll be at least 10,000 tons, whether we do 5 or 6 stopes. And there's a few pieces yet to fall into place, but it'll be at least 10,000 tons. And that's happening right now. So we will produce gold from this bulk sample over the next few weeks, which is obviously really exciting. And it's happening. Coincidentally, it's happening at the same time that connection drift, that big 1.4 kilometer long tunnel that's connecting the two sides of the mine, that's just so essential for moving material efficiently. We're like 38 meters away from finishing that 1.4 kilometer tunnel. So, in the month of April.
Percentage completion. I read in your news release it had like a percentage completion.
Yeah. So now, as of today, we're probably at like 98, maybe 98 and a half. I do get a daily report, and I certainly check it the moment that it comes in.
Great.
So yeah, there's a bunch of key accomplishments, and the mill is turning, and it's going to produce gold from the bulk sample right now. And then there will be a pause after while we make sure that everything's set the way that it needs to be, and that the stockpiles are the size that they need to be before we go into consistent processing. But we don't expect it to be a long pause. We will, make sure we're ready to go consistently when we go. And then in the second half of the year, that's always been what we've said, the second half of the year, let's do this.
So you said you just got back from a site visit. What were you doing there? Were you showing people around? Were you capturing content for your own use? Why were you there? What was going on?
Yeah, so we weren't showing anyone around. It was just, I was there with some other members of the management team. It's pretty important to my role, if you want to sum it up in one word, is to explain what everyone there is doing. So it's really important for me to go and just spend time there and make sure that I connect with the chief geologist and the chief engineer and the mill manager and the underground superintendent and the maintenance manager, and just really get a sense of how things are working, what the challenges are, how they've addressed those challenges. Like it's really valuable when I am able to go and spend time there. The other thing is communications also in a company like ours means making sure that the corporate team and the site team are communicating well. So that's an important piece of my job as well. So I need to make sure that I'm understanding the dynamics of that relationship and what I might be able to do to help that. So I get up, I try to go to the morning meeting, the 6 a.m. mining huddle every day when I'm there, so that I can get a sense of how that is. And that was actually really cool. I hadn't been to site since the late fall. So it had been quite a few months since I'd been to site, just the way things worked out with conferences and whatnot. And it was really cool to see how much that morning meeting had matured in terms of like the organization of the meeting and the number of number of miners who were there being given their tasks, and the number of pieces of equipment that were being divvied out, and just the quality of the safety conversation, which is what starts every meeting. It was just really cool to see that meeting and how it's just really matured and clocking along. So that's what I was there for. And we also did an exec meeting while we were there once every 5 or 6 weeks. We try to get all 8 of us in the same room. It's hard, but we do our best, so that we can talk about what we're doing, why we're doing it, what the big challenges are, and where we're going with this company. So we did that as well.
Excellent. And for those of my viewers that haven't seen our other videos, just a quick elevator pitch. We're getting in the elevator together. Pitch me. What's West Red Lake?
West Red Lake is putting the Madsen Gold Mine in Red Lake, Ontario back into production. Red Lake is a prolific gold district that's put out 30 million ounces of gold over a 100-year history. So there's really proven ways to mine the gold in Red Lake. The Madsen Mine, unfortunately, the last iteration of the Madsen Mine, those rules weren't followed. And so the mine stumbled and went bankrupt. West Red Lake came in and bought that asset for pennies on the dollar, and is right now, after not quite 2 years of owning it, we are on the cusp of putting it back into production, having followed those rules of thumb for how to mine in Red Lake. And that means that because we were contrarian, bought a hated asset when gold was still worth less than $2,000 an ounce, we're now right on the edge of being a rare new gold mine in 2025 in what looks to be a pretty fantastic gold market.
And putting your newsletter hat on for a moment, I know your past life. Single asset mining companies, do they tend to be good acquisition stories?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things we talked about in that exec meeting that I just referenced is that, right? And we talk about it from a couple angles. And the answer is no, single asset operators don't generally live very long. And so that's either they acquire something else to put more legs on the stool, so to speak, or they get acquired because their asset can feed somebody else's stool. That's just the nature of mining, as it should be. And so that was a big part of our conversation. I think in general, in mining, I don't think that it works for a company to position itself to be acquired. I think that the approach that works for a company is to build a really good company. And if you do that, you may well get acquired. So that's our goal. Our goal is to build a very good company. It always has been. You can go back to interviews with Shane, 15, 20 months ago, and he says, look, the goal here is to successfully put Madsen into production, get the people right, get the culture right, get the reputation right, do it right at Madsen, and then that becomes our foundation for growth. And that remains the mantra here today.
Excellent. What are some upcoming key catalysts that shareholders and investors should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, so these bulk sample results are undeniably the key catalyst. I mean, arguably the most important piece of news that West Red Lake will have put out in its 2-year existence will be the bulk sample. And this is, of course, the first 10,000 tons of mining done with people watching, basically, third-party observers watching, so that we can, after mining these 5 or 6 stopes, these 5 or 6 mining areas, step back and say, okay, our model, our internal mining model, our stope book said this stope would have this many tons at this grade, and this stope would have this, and this stope would have this. And we mined it and we processed it, and this is what we actually pulled from the ground. And of course, if there's 2 sides to why the prior operator stumbled here, one of them was probably the most important one, was that they didn't deliver tons and grade as modeled to the mine. They failed on that quite substantially. So our ability to deliver the tons and grade that we say we're going to get out of each stope to the mill is really fundamental to the investment thesis here. So those results will come out towards the end of April, and that'll be a really important milestone. I know from lots of conversations that there are investors out there who are interested, who sort of like the concept of, like the approach, like everything that we're saying, but need to see it happen. And so I'm optimistic that that'll be well received. And we are sampling the samples as we go, and very curious. And we're being given reason to believe that this is working. That everything that we've set out to do, we're doing.
Great. Well, definitely sitting on pins and needles here. Yeah, just waiting for that. That's good. That's great. Well, we wish you lots of luck with that. So a couple of questions, maybe more just fun, macro. Is the gold in Fort Knox?
That is a very good question here. I mean, I actually don't even know anymore. You can read one set of articles one day and you're like, it's all gone. And then you read another one and you're like, it's all there. And then I don't know. I can't, there's too many things to think about with West Red Lake. I can't puzzle my way through that
one. How about sort of the, stage of the market? Sometimes typically around this time, things start to soften a little bit as we start to get into, sell in May, go away. It's more like sell in April, go away. And it traditionally, do you think we're going to have a different year this year? Again, crystal ball, not holding anybody accountable. I'm throwing a curveball at you. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that conventional historic patterns are not as important this year, given the number of very significant current forces, right? Like Trump and tariffs and deglobalization and de-dollarization. And I mean, these are not just ideas. These are like being actively pushed at us. A weakening dollar, lower interest rates, talk about debt burdens. These things are very real. So the way that I look at the gold market is that for the previous 5-6 years, the gold price did pretty darn well. But that was without Western investors participating in it. Western investors were not given any reason to care about the gold market until quite recently. And so the gold price did well because of central bank buying and because of investors of all sorts buying outside of the West. So Chinese and Middle East and Indian and lots of other areas, they were the ones buying gold. But those investors, central banks and those investors, they don't buy gold stocks. They bought gold hand over fist. That's what happened to the price, but they don't buy gold stocks. Now, are we now in a situation where Western investors are being given very specific reason to be interested in gold? Like they're being given the knee-jerk reason to buy gold that has happened many times in the past? Yeah, they're being served it on a platter. And usually the pattern that I think does matter today is that usually when Western investors are given reason to buy gold, they do not only buy the metal, they also buy the equities. And so from where you sit and where I sit, that's the thing that I think matters the most. And is it going to happen consistently through the summer? I mean, people still go on vacation in July. I get it. But I do think that it only takes like 1% of capital that is currently in the tech sector to rotate, and that equals the entire market cap of the top 100 gold mining companies, right? The allocation rotation needs to be only tiny for it to have an immense impact on equities, gold equities, which are absolutely undeniably undervalued relative to the gold price, have been for years. We've had this conversation ad nauseum. So that's the force that I think is most interesting. And I know at that BMO conference last month, the big takeaway for several people I spoke to there, including Shane, was how much money the gold companies have. They are making so much money at current gold prices. They have so much money in the bank. That's also a really important force. If they start paying more dividends, guess what? More reason for generalist investors to rotate into this space. If they start making acquisitions, guess what? There's a specific reason for investors to get excited about this space again. So I think that there's cards lined up in our favor this year that haven't been for a really long time.
Excellent. What's the next trip that you have going on for yourself? Next conference? Are you done for the season, or do you have more?
No, I'm leaving on Sunday to fly to Zurich. The group that does the Denver Gold Forum, that comes right after Beaver Creek, they also have for 22 years have done the Europe Gold Forum. I may have the words of that, maybe the Gold Europe. Anyways. And so that's happening in Zurich the first 2 days of April. So I'm heading over to do that because we are now a big enough company that we can go to shows that are for producing companies. We got invited. So I'm going to go over and do that.
Excellent. You guys are a very liquid stock. You tend to be one of the top traders almost daily. Who's buying the shares these days?
I mean, the reason that we are so liquid, I mean, if you want to look at it from the negative side, is for sure we've done lots of financings, but the share price, as much as it hasn't risen, has held its ground over this last little while. And that's because we keep finding buyers. And I mean, we do a lot of marketing. And in the context that I was just describing, lately we've been focused a lot on marketing this idea, this opportunity to generalist investors. The gold market is very familiar with the Madsen mine, right? For better or worse, they're very familiar with the Madsen mine. But generalist investors don't have the baggage of the history. And I'm not trying to, you know what I mean? That happened. We believe that we can unlock this asset and that we are a rare company that's going to go from a developer to a producer in 2025. And that's a story, that's a transition that almost always brings about a significant increase in the value of a company because you go from spending money to making it. And so I've been working really hard to reach generalist investors and explain to them the opportunity that's here. So I think that's where the buying's coming from.
And what's how many shares approximately are outstanding, and what would be your approximate market cap today?
Market cap is right around the 200 million mark. Oh gosh, what are the shares outstanding? 379 million is what I'm going to say. I may have that number wrong. For some reason, it's not right on the tip of my tongue. I'm going to blame this cold, but I believe it's that number.
Okay. And so in terms of peer, do you have any peer comparables that you could point to that have similar amount of production, and have a valuation that people should be looking at as maybe where you guys might go if you're successful?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few companies that have gone through similar processes in recent years, unlocking value at potentially a difficult asset and then demonstrating success at it and then getting the recognition in the market for having done that. I think Island Gold, that's a great mine as an example. It was a struggle, but then they unlocked it, and oh my goodness, that mine is making a ton of money. K92 is not actually that far off an example either. I mean, they have a mine in Papua New Guinea. When they bought that asset, the market was so cynical that they would ever be able to put that thing into production. K92 currently only produces not a lot over 100,000 ounces a year. What's their market cap? It's in the billions. I'm not sure what it is. So I'm not saying that we're going there, but if you want to look at where West Red Lake valuation, what some people suggest valuation could be upon success with the Madsen mine, the easy way of looking at it is just with the value of the asset. So if you use a $2,600 long-term gold price in the financial model for the mine plan, it gives an NPV. It gives a value to the asset of just about $500 million. And that, when you're a developer, being valued at about 0.4 of your asset value is pretty common. That's exactly where we are today. When you're in production, are you 0.8 to 1 times the value of your asset? That's the kind of potential that is on the table. And that is before incorporating a bunch of things that we did not have an opportunity to talk about today, which is fine. But that mine plan is a really conservative look at Madsen. It had a really high cutoff grade, low gold price used in deciding what tons were economic to mine. There's lots of opportunity at Madsen to make Madsen potentially bigger and longer lived than that mine plan laid out. So yeah, that's the laydown.
Watch our previous video for that, because we did go through that in detail in our last one.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, I looked at K92. They're at about a $2.8 billion valuation on a Canadian basis as of today. So there you go. That's an interesting comparable for us to kind of look at. Are there any sort of final thoughts you want to leave us with?
So yeah, I mean, I was just at site, and it was great for the reasons that I was there, to reconnect and make sure that I'm up to speed on the story. But also, we opened our camp. So now there's a 114 person camp with really nice rooms. Everybody's got their own bathroom, good food. Like the new mine dry, we got the permit. This thing's almost built. A really comfortable, nice place for miners to transition into and out of their shifts. The culture there is just strong. People are optimistic. People are interested in coming to Madsen from other mining operations in Red Lake or farther afield in Canada. We're getting applications because people are hearing about the culture and the approach that we have at the Madsen mine, and they want to come and work for us, which is super important because, there's a lot of thinking that goes in on, from the Vancouver office. But at the end of the day, what matters is that you have really good people at site, mining the right rocks, moving them efficiently, and making sure that you make money, right? And so the fact that we're attracting good people who want to come and work at Madsen is significant, and we're really gratified to see that. So it was fun to be at site last week for sure.
Well, that's good. How many analysts currently cover the story?
Yeah, so we have Craig Stanley of Raymond James, we have Matt O'Keefe of Cantor Fitzgerald, and we have Paul O'Brien of Velocity Trade. And Taylor Combozier of Red Cloud. So there's 4 different sets of analyst reports out there for people to peruse.
And do you guys ever get any sort of like holdings or any understanding of which ETFs might own you?
So none yet, but we're right on the edge of that. So that's one of the things that I've been watching quite closely. We are pretty much there on right on the edge of value that we need to be at, market cap. And then there's also a daily trading requirement that we're also right on the edge of. So as soon as my plan, as much as it can be a plan, is for these bulk sample results to come out, and then a little bit of a lift in share price, and we should become a contender for like GDXJ. So that could be another significant thing that happens in 2025.
Do you have an idea of like is there like really one ETF, or are there many that you might qualify for? Sometimes that sort of buying can materialize price appreciation in the market, just like sometimes when they have to rebalance and there can be nasty sellers, it can have a bit of a nasty effect on the way out. So it sounds like you're not owned by anybody yet, so there might not be a nasty exit, but there could be the benefit of the buying. How many ETFs are you sort of following, or is it
Yeah.
more than one? Is it a couple?
Yeah, I mean the GDXJ is so much the big dog in the house that it's the one that I'm focusing on. But there certainly are others, smaller funds that follow suit. They don't actively, but it's essentially you can think that they follow suit, and they all have pretty similar requirements. So we're right on the edge of those. And yeah, we're in the honeymoon phase of that, or we're close to the honeymoon phase of that, where we're hopefully about to be included in these indices. So yes, that could be a nice addition to the story.
Excellent. Well, Gwen, I think we'll sort of leave it there. Thanks very much for the update. Look forward to catching up with you probably in the quiet sort of summer. It'll be after you've put out some news on the bulk sample, and we'll get a chance to understand grade and all that sort of stuff. So look forward to catching up with you then. But thanks so much for updating us on all the activities since we last chatted.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation. And yeah, let's talk again after we get those bulk sample results out.
Sounds good. Thank you.